An ancient forest is dying, and only one person can hear its final whisper. Elara, a young botanist who feels the emotions of plants, walked through this withering wood, her heart aching with every fallen leaf. Deep in the forest's heart, she found a single, pulsating emerald seed, glowing with a faint, desperate light. Her decision to reach out and touch, it changed everything. A surge of raw energy awakened inside her, and a spectral vision flooded her mind. A vision of a massive, vine-covered gate crumbling into dust. This was the Verdant Gate, the anchor of all nature's order, and it was failing. By the end of this story, you will understand how a single act of courage can restore balance to an entire world. Alara now knows she must find the lost guardians of the gate before the world's life force fades completely. A mysterious shadow that feeds on decay is already spreading, and the clock is ticking. What forgotten part of nature do you think holds the deepest secrets? The emerald seed's pull was a gentle, insistent tug at her very soul, leading Alara deeper into the woods where the light struggled to penetrate. With every step, she opened herself to the forest's anguish, a skill she was only just beginning to understand. Her hands brushed against a weeping willow's bark, and a torrent of images flooded her mind, not of sorrow, but of fracture. She saw the great Verdant Gate again, its stone pillars webbed with cracks, its ancient seals glowing faintly as they strained to hold. The balance was not just failing, it was being actively torn apart. This silent communion, however, was a beacon in the decaying wood. A low growl rumbled from the thicket, and the very air turned cold. From the shadows emerged a creature of twisted vine and jagged thorn, its form a mockery of the life it once was, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger for the decay it carried. It lunged without warning. Fear clenched Alara's heart, but a deeper instinct surged forward. She threw her hands out, not to strike, but to protect, and a raw, untamed power erupted from her. Vines snapped from the earth, not with gentle grace, but with desperate force, tangling the beast and halting its charge mere inches from her. The magic felt wild and terrifying, a storm she had unleashed, but could not control. As the corrupted creature crumbled into dust, it left behind a single object, a shard of polished obsidian that seemed to drink the light around it. And then, the forest breathed a single, clear word into her mind, a name carried on the wind through the leaves. Kalin, a lost guardian, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming dark. The name Kalin was a compass in her mind, and it guided her steps for days. It led her away from the deep woods and into a high, secluded valley where the air was thin and the silence felt heavy with regret. Here, she found a man living among moss-covered stones, his movements slow and deliberate, his eyes holding the weight of centuries. This was Kalin, but he was not the mighty guardian of her vision. He was a hermit who had turned his back on the world. He watched her approach with a weary resignation. "I have no answers for you, child," he said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "The gate is lost. The keepers are scattered because of my failure. I will not be responsible for more." Elara did not plead or demand. Instead, she sat on a stone opposite him and opened her hands, the memory of the emerald seed pulsing within her. She did not tell him of the dying forest. She showed him. She let the vision flow from her, the sight of the crumbling gate, the desperate whisper of the trees, the raw, aching hope she had felt when she touched the seed. She let him feel the pure, unbroken life that still fought against the shadow. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind. Kalin's stern expression fractured, a flicker of the old fire returning to his gaze. "You carry its light," he whispered, a profound sadness and a dawning wonder in his voice. I had forgotten what that felt like. His resolve, built over long years of solitude, finally cracked. He agreed to guide her, but his help came with a grave warning. The path is broken, and the first test is merely a step. We must find the Waystones, the ancient markers placed by the first keepers. They are the only map that leads to the gate itself. Their journey to the first Waystone began in a tense, fragile silence. It was not a grand adventure, but a cautious trek through a canyon of whispering echoes. Every shadow seemed to watch them, and the fledgling trust between a weary guardian and a hopeful botanist was about to be tested by the land itself. The canyon's whispering echoes gave way to a thick, oppressive humidity. Their path descended into a vast, murky swamp where the very air tasted of rot and stagnant water. Gnarled trees draped in moss rose from the murk, and the ground was an unstable tapestry of soggy peat and hidden sinkholes. This was the resting place of the first Waystone. Kalin pointed a trembling hand toward a patch of water that seemed unnaturally still. "Down there," he said, his voice strained. "It sleeps in the deep, but we are not its only guests." From the shadows of the mangroves, figures emerged. They were the marsh dwellers, slender and amphibious, with intelligent, unblinking eyes that assessed the intruders with cold curiosity. They held spears tipped with sharpened bone, and their territorial clicks and hisses filled the air. A direct fight would be hopeless. Alara stepped forward, her hands open and empty. She closed her eyes, pushing her awareness past her own fear, past the hostility, and into the life that pulsed within the swamp itself. She felt the ancient, patient rhythm of the murky water, the stubborn will of the twisted trees, and then the clear, sharp intelligence of the dwellers. It was not malice she found, but a fierce, protective love for their home. They saw the stone as a part of it, a heart that must not be stolen. She did not speak their language, but she poured that understanding back toward them, a wave of empathy, carrying a simple promise. "We are not here to take, but to mend." The lead dweller tilted its head, then gave a slow, deliberate nod, stepping aside. The way was open. Now it was Kalin's turn. He waded into the cold, chest-deep water, his face a mask of concentration. He placed his hands on the submerged stone, his muscles straining not against its weight, but against the centuries of inertia that had settled upon it. This was not a test of brute strength, but of will, of reconnection. A low groan echoed through the swamp as ancient mechanisms, long seized by silt and time, began to stir. Vines, responding to his call, coiled like great ropes around the stone, pulling with a creaking effort. With a final, gasping heave from Kalin, the massive Waystone broke the surface, water streaming from its carved surface. He slumped against it, his breath coming in ragged pants, but his eyes shone with a light that had been absent for generations. As the last of the water fell away, the stone ignited. A map of shimmering, golden light erupted into the air, charting a course through mountains and valleys they had yet to cross. But the triumph was fleeting. Kalin stumbled back onto solid ground, his body trembling with exhaustion. The cost of awakening his power was written plainly on his ashen face, and as they looked up from the glowing map, their eyes were drawn to the trees at the swamp's edge. A creeping, black blight was spreading through the bark with visible speed, corrupting vibrant green into brittle gray. Their enemy was not just waiting. It was watching, and now it knew they were coming. The creeping blackness in the swamp was a poison that moved faster than nature itself. They followed its trail, a grim pilgrimage toward the source of this corruption. It led them not to a fortress of shadow, but to a place of profound sorrow, the ruins of a keeper outpost. Crumbling arches, overgrown with that same brittle gray blight, stood as silent tombstones. Elara's heart ached as her senses brushed against the stone, feeling only a hollow, final silence where once there had been vibrant life. Inside a collapsed chamber, half buried under rubble, she found it, a leather-bound journal, its pages miraculously preserved. The name etched on the cover was Lyra. As Elara's fingers traced the elegant script, the words seemed to breathe a forgotten tragedy into the air. Lyra wrote of a council divided, of a fear so potent it split the guardians apart. She described a ritual, the Severance, a desperate act, where the keepers willingly shattered their shared connection to the Verdant Gate. They believed their unified power was a beacon, one that was attracting a devouring entity from beyond the veil. To save the world from total consumption, they chose to break it themselves. The journal fell from Elara's numb hands. The gate did not just fail, it was sabotaged by its own protectors. She turned to Kalin, the truth a cold stone in her chest. You knew, his shoulders slumped, the weight of centuries finally bowing him completely. I was there, he whispered, his voice raw. I cast the final seal. We thought we were containing a fire, but we only banked the embers of our own extinction. The entity did not leave, it adapted, learning to feed on the decay our broken magic left behind. My courage failed, Alara. I chose the certainty of a slow death over the gamble of a noble fight. The admission hung between them, a chasm of shattered trust. Elara saw not a legendary guardian, but a terrified man whose single, catastrophic choice had doomed the world to a wasting disease. Could she follow someone who had already surrendered? Her gaze fell upon the journal, on Lyra's final, hopeful entry speaking of a hidden resilience in nature, a seed of renewal. That was the gamble she had to take. We cannot fix this alone, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Your mistake does not define our path forward, only our starting point. We find the others. Lyra's journal spoke of a refuge, a sanctuary high in the Serpent's Spine Mountains, where some of the scattered keepers might have fled. Their journey now had a new destination, and a fragile, hard-won understanding that some scars must be reopened if they are ever to heal. The mountains known as the Serpent's Spine were a fortress of stone and sky. Their journey upward was a brutal test of endurance, a vertical world of biting winds and sheer rock faces that offered no mercy. Inside the network of caves that pierced the mountainside, a new danger awaited. The walls were studded with crystalline flora, beautiful formations that pulsed with a soft, internal light. But as Alara and Kalin entered, the light flickered erratically, shifting from a gentle blue to an aggressive, warning red. The crystals began to vibrate, their sharp edges extending like claws, sensitive to the disruption of their ancient slumber. Kalin raised a hand, ready to shatter them with a blast of force, but Alara stopped him. She stepped forward, closing her eyes and reaching out not with her hands, but with her spirit. She poured a wave of calm, reassuring energy into the cavern, a gentle hum of pure life that soothed the agitated gems. One by one, the crystals retracted, their light softening back to a serene blue, creating a safe, glowing path through the heart of the mountain. It was a subtle, profound mastery that Kalin, with all his raw power, could never have achieved. Deep within the highest chamber, they found what they had come for, but it was not the reunion they had hoped. Encased in a tomb of living crystal was a woman, her form visible as a silhouette within the flawless prism. This was Bryn, the guardian of stone, who had chosen eternal stasis over a slow, decaying death. Her eyes were open, staring out at a world she had long since given up on. Kalin called her name, his voice echoing in the silent cavern, but there was no response, only the impenetrable silence of absolute surrender. Elara approached the crystal cocoon, placing her palms against its cold, smooth surface. She did not try to break it with force. Instead, she spoke, her voice soft but clear, weaving a tapestry of truth. She spoke of the emerald seed's desperate hope, of the swamp dwellers' fierce love for their home, and of the black blight that was actively consuming everything, even this mountain's heart. She showed Bryn the journal, Lyra's words a testament to their failure, but also to their enduring purpose. "We thought we were saving the world by breaking it," Alara said, her words echoing slightly. "But the world is still fighting. It is asking for our help. It is asking for you." For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, a single hairline fracture appeared on the crystal's surface. It spread, branching out like a lightning strike, until with a sound like 1,000 bells shattering at once, the prison exploded outward. Bryn stood before them, her stance unyielding, her eyes blazing with a fire that had been banked for generations. The energy released was a shockwave of pure, untamed power, a beacon that lit up the entire mountain peak. That beacon was their undoing. From the shadowed valleys below, a chorus of guttural roars answered the call. The corrupted creatures, drawn by the massive energy signature, were now swarming the lower slopes, their dark forms scrambling up the rock with terrifying speed. There was no time for celebration. The three guardians, reunited by a thread of desperate hope, turned and fled deeper into the caves, the sounds of their pursuers echoing at their backs. They had gained a powerful ally, but in doing so, they had announced their presence to the very shadow that sought to devour them. The canyon walls closed in around them, a narrow passage of jagged stone that amplified every sound into a terrifying echo. The guttural roars from the mountain became the panting of beasts, and from the shadows between the rocks, the blight took its first tangible form. They were wolf-like creatures woven from decay itself, with fur of shifting darkness and eyes that burned like cold embers. They moved with a predator's grace, flowing over the stone without a sound, their very presence leaching the color from the world. The running battle began. Bryn reacted first, her hands slicing through the air. Crystalline barriers erupted from the canyon floor, intercepting a lunging shadow beast with a shatter of dark energy and prismatic light. Kalin, his face set in grim determination, answered with raw force. He stomped his foot, and the earth itself buckled, sending a tremor that threw two other creatures into the air, their forms dissipating like smoke against the canyon walls. Elara stood between them, a nexus of support. She did not strike. Instead, she wove a different kind of magic. Where Bryn's crystals cracked and Kalin's earth shattered, Alara's power nurtured. Vines, thick and resilient, shot from cracks in the stone, entangling the creature's legs, buying precious seconds. She reinforced Bryn's barriers with interwoven layers of living wood, and she guided Kalin's tremors to avoid unstable sections of the cliff face. Their magic was a discordant symphony, finding its rhythm, a blend of brutal defense and stubborn life. Then Elara saw it, a small, hidden grotto tucked into the canyon wall, invisible to anyone not feeling the pulse of the land. Within it, a cluster of luminous moss and delicate, bell-shaped flowers thrived, a pocket of pure, uncorrupted life. The quickest escape route led right through it, a path that would have meant certain destruction for that fragile world. The choice was instant. She veered from the clear path, shouting for the others to follow her into a narrower, more dangerous defile. It cost them time. A shadow wolf lunged, its claws raking across Kalin's arm before Bryn's crystal spike impaled it. But the grotto remained untouched, its gentle light a silent testament to her decision. In that moment, she was not just a wielder of power, she was its guardian. The act solidified a truth they all felt. She was the unwavering heart of their mission, the reason they fought beyond mere survival. They finally broke free of the canyon's confines, stumbling out onto a windswept plateau. As they caught their breath, the scattered remnants of the shadow pack did not give chase. Instead, they flowed together, merging into a single, larger form that stared at them with chilling intelligence before dissolving back into the landscape. It was not a retreat, it was a message. These hunters were merely the fingertips of a greater consciousness, the Blight Weaver the journal had hinted at, and now it knew exactly where they were and what they sought to do. Their flight was no longer just an escape. It was a race against an awakening enemy. Their only hope now was to find the next lost guardian with desperate haste, a search that would push their fragile alliance to its absolute limit. The river appeared as if from a dream, its silver waters winding through a landscape still untouched by decay. This was no ordinary stream. Its surface shimmered, not with reflected light, but with echoes of time itself. As Elara knelt by its bank, the cool mist from the water brushed her face, and a vision unfolded before her. She saw the circle of keepers, not as traitors, but as grieving heroes. Their faces were etched with a terrible love as they channeled their unified power, not to strengthen the Verdant Gate, but to fracture it. She felt the agony of that choice, the belief that their self-inflicted wound was the only way to save the patient from a consuming disease. It was not cowardice she witnessed, but a heart-wrenching, sacrificial love for the world they were sworn to protect. That understanding settled deep within her, hardening her resolve into something unbreakable. For Kalin, the river was not a gentle teacher, but a tribunal. He stood rigid, his knuckles white as he stared into the flowing water. He saw not the grand ritual, but the moments after, the quiet devastation on the faces of his comrades as their shared purpose was torn from them. He saw Bryn's look of betrayed trust, and Finn's hand reaching out as he turned to walk away into solitude. The river forced him to witness the cascading consequences of his choice, the loneliness he had condemned them all to. He did not speak for a long time, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. Finally, he looked up, his eyes clear for the first time since Alara had found him. I spent generations hiding from this, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But you cannot outrun a shadow you carry inside. I will not hide anymore. I will learn from the ruin I helped create. The river, acknowledging his newfound acceptance, seemed to guide their steps, its current leading them gently upstream to a wide, serene lake, cradled by emerald hills. The air was still and peaceful, the only sound the gentle lap of water against a small, weathered dock. And there he was, a man with a kind, weathered face, patiently mending a fishing net. This was Finn, the guardian of the flow, who had traded world-altering power for the simple rhythm of cast and catch. He greeted them with a quiet smile that did not reach his tired eyes. The world's troubles are not for this place, he said, his gaze drifting over the placid water. Here, there is only peace, but the peace was an illusion. As Alara opened her mouth to speak, a dark tendril of corruption snaked through the clear water near the shore. A patch of vibrant lilies withered and turned to sludge before their eyes. The Blight Weaver had found this sanctuary too. The serene surface of the lake began to churn, the clear blue darkening to a sickly, murky green. Finn's net fell from his hands, his peaceful existence shattered by the very decay he had tried to escape. His purpose, long buried, now rose to meet the poison, threatening to consume his last refuge. Finn's peaceful refuge was now a battlefield. The placid lake, his sanctuary for generations, churned with a sickly green poison. His hands, which had only known the gentle work of mending nets, trembled at his sides. He could feel the life within the water screaming, a silent agony that pierced the heart he had tried so hard to close. I left it all behind to protect this, he whispered, his voice thick with grief. I wanted one small corner of the world to remain pure. Elara stepped to the water's edge, her own connection to life flaring in protest at the corruption. Sometimes protecting something means fighting for it, she said, her gaze steady on his. Your peace was a gift, Finn, but the war has come to take it back. Will you help us defend what remains? Finn's eyes moved from the dying lilies to Alara's unwavering hope, to Kalin's grim resolve, and Bryn's stoic readiness. The conflict within him was a storm, but it lasted only a moment. A profound calm settled over his features. He nodded, and for the first time in centuries, the guardian of the flow opened himself fully to his power. He waded into the fouled water, the toxic sludge recoiling from his presence. He did not attack the Blight with force. Instead, he began to sing, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the very bedrock of the lake. The water itself answered his call, swirling around him in great, crystalline spirals. He was not commanding it. He was reminding it of what it was, of its own inherent purity. The green poison fought back, clinging to the currents, but Finn's will was a torrent. With a final, explosive release of energy, he thrust his hands outward. A wave of pristine, azure light radiated from his body, washing through the entire lake. The murky green vanished, replaced by a clarity so absolute the stones at the bottom looked polished. The act was a brilliant, defiant flare in the growing darkness, and it was a challenge the Blight Weaver could not ignore. From the depths of the newly cleansed lake, a monstrous shape erupted. It was a serpent woven from concentrated corruption, its scales like polished obsidian, its maw dripping with the same vile sludge Finn had just expelled. It was a perversion of the very element he commanded, a direct mockery of his power. The four of them stood together on the shore, their alliance only moments old. Now Kalin roared. He slammed his fists into the ground, and a wall of stone erupted from the earth, deflecting the serpent's first lunge. Bryn's hands flew up, and a hail of sharp, diamond-hard crystals shot through the air, peppering the creature's armored hide. It was not enough. The beast was too large, its form already reforming where the crystals struck. Finn, still standing chest deep in the water, focused his will. He didn't try to fight the water the serpent was made of. He commanded the water around it. Liquid bands, thick as ancient ropes, wrapped around the monstrosity, holding it fast for a crucial second. Alara, he shouted, his voice strained. Its core, she understood. While the others provided the force, she sought the life within the abomination. She found it, a tangled knot of agonized nature, a water spirit that had been twisted and broken. She poured her empathy into that knot, not to destroy, but to soothe, to release. Her power was the key, and theirs the turning force. Kalin's earth tremors disrupted its foundation. Bryn's crystal shattered its form, and Finn's currents unraveled its substance. With a final, deafening shriek that was part roar and part sorrowful sigh, the corrupted serpent dissolved, collapsing back into the water as harmless, dark mist that faded into nothing. The lake was saved, but the cost was written on their faces and the scarred shore. Finn stumbled from the water, his energy utterly spent. His home was pure again, but the memory of the violation, the violence that had been required to cleanse it, had changed the place forever. The peace he had cherished was gone, replaced by the grim satisfaction of a necessary victory. As he stood there, breathing heavily, the Waystone map flared to life above them, its golden lines burning brighter than ever before. The path was clear now, leading away from the lush, water-rich lands, pointing unequivocally toward a vast and barren expanse of sand. The next lost guardian waited in a forgotten desert, where life itself was a secret kept from the sun. The golden map led them into a world of relentless sun and shifting sand. The scorched expanse was a kingdom of thirst, where the very air stole moisture from their lips and the horizon shimmered in a perpetual, punishing haze. Their journey became a desperate trudge, each step a battle against the soft, swallowing dunes. Hope felt as scarce as water, and their spirits withered under the oppressive glare. Kalin's earth magic was muted here, the sands sliding away from his will, while Bryn and Finn conserved their strength, their powers ill-suited to this barren realm. It was Elara, her senses tuned to the faintest whisper of life, who became their compass. She would pause, her hand resting on a seemingly dead thorn bush, and feel the deep, patient pulse of roots stretching down to secret aquifers. She led them to pockets of life invisible to the eye, a patch of hardy scrub that offered bitter, moisture-rich leaves, or a fissure in a rock that concealed a damp, cool hollow. The desert spoke to her in a language of stubborn survival, and she learned to listen. Their destination was a vast dune sea, a place where landmarks died under the wandering winds. The fourth Waystone was buried somewhere in that golden ocean. Alara closed her eyes, sinking her awareness deep beneath the burning surface. She felt it then, a faint, steady hum far below, a bedrock anchor in a world of flux. Here, she told Kalin, her voice a dry croak. It is deep. Kalin nodded, his face grim. He planted his feet, such as they were in the unstable sand, and pushed his power downward. This was not like lifting a stone from a swamp. This was a fight against a trillion shifting grains. He strained, his muscles corded, and the sand around them began to tremble. Slowly, grudgingly, the dune began to part, sand flowing away like water from a massive geometric block of sandstone emerging from the depths. As the Waystone settled onto the newly formed solid ground, they surrounded it. This time, they knew a simple touch would not be enough. Kalin placed a hand upon it, his power a steady, grounding force. Bryn layered his strength with crystalline clarity, and Finn guided the subtle energies like a current. Finally, Elara added her own, the vibrant pulse of life itself. Their four distinct magics flowed together, a chorus of elements meeting at the stone. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, the stone ignited, not with a simple map, but with a cataclysmic surge of light. A web of brilliant gold lines exploded from its surface, not just charting a path in the air, but searing itself into their very perception. They could now feel it, a vast, trembling network of power running through the world like veins. The ley lines themselves, the magical anatomy of their dying world, laid bare. The revelation was overwhelming, and the energy required to achieve it was equally immense. The ground beneath them buckled violently in a localized earthquake, the sands churning like a stormy sea. When the tremors subsided, a great rift had been torn open in the desert floor, revealing not bedrock, but the carved rooftops and towers of a buried city. And there, trapped within a dome of translucent, solidified sand at the city's heart, was a figure they could just make out, a silhouette of a woman, her hand pressed against her crystalline prison, as if waiting for an age. The fourth guardian was not lost, she was entombed. The air within the buried city was heavy with the dust of ages and the weight of a solitary vigil. This was the city of echoes, and every footstep they took whispered back to them from the stone, carrying fragments of the lives once lived there. At its heart, they found Reese, the guardian of stone, but he was not a prisoner within the dome of sand. He was its warden. He stood before a massive, ornate seal, carved into the floor of a grand plaza, his body fused with the stone pillars around him in a network of living rock, a permanent anchor holding something terrible at bay. His voice was the grating of tectonic plates, low and resonant with unimaginable strain. You should not have come. Your presence is a tremor I cannot afford. The gate is a forgotten dream. My duty is here, containing a reality that would unravel yours. He saw them not as saviors, but as a catastrophic distraction. Elara did not argue. She walked slowly through the empty streets, her hands brushing against the walls, opening herself to the city's psychic imprint. The echoes flooded her, not with words, but with pure sensation. She felt the terror of the city's final days, the desperate flight of its people, and Reese's agonizing choice to stay, to bind his very essence to the stone and become a living lock on a prison door. She saw the forgotten evil he contained, a formless hunger that writhed in the darkness below, a cousin to the Blight Weaver, perhaps, or a different facet of the same consuming void. She returned to the plaza and looked at Reese, her eyes holding the sorrow of 1,000 lost souls. You have borne this burden alone for so long, she said, her voice soft but carrying through the silent city. But you are treating a symptom, not the sickness. The decay outside is the same as the hunger you hold down here. It all stems from the broken gate. We are not here to ask you to abandon your post. We are here to ask you to help us fix the source. Risk's stone-fused form seemed to tremble. To leave is to risk everything. The seal will fail without my constant presence. As if in response to his doubt, a sickly black vapor began to seep from the edges of the great seal. The Blight Weaver's influence, drawn by their collective power and the revealed ley lines, had found his hidden prison. The ancient stone of the plaza began to crack, the black tendrils of corruption snaking upward, seeking to poison his bonds and free the horror beneath. Reese roared, a sound of sheer defiance, and the entire city shook as he poured his power into reinforcing the seal. But the Blight was relentless, a corrosive force that fed on his magic itself. He was holding back the ocean with a buckling wall. His eyes, full of granite resolve for centuries, finally showed a flicker of desperate understanding. He looked from the failing seal to Alara, to the other guardians standing ready. My vigil was meant to protect the world, he growled, the stone around him groaning as he began the painful process of severing his connection. But I have only been guarding a tomb. A true guardian does not hide from the fire, he fights it at its source. With a sound like a mountain breaking in two, Reese pulled free. The living stone that had been his anchor shattered, and he stumbled forward, his body whole but his spirit scarred. The moment his connection broke, the city of echoes began to die in earnest. Towers that had stood for millennia crumbled, and great plazas collapsed into the dark abyss they had once contained. Their flight from the disintegrating city was a race against total annihilation, the ground giving way behind them as they ran. As they finally burst out onto the desert sands, gasping and covered in dust, the five keepers stood together for the first time. Elara, the heart; Kalin, the will; Bryn, the form; Finn, the flow; and Reese, the foundation. A chorus of power, once shattered, was now whole, and from the heart of the world, through the newly revealed ley lines, they all felt it, a desperate final pull. The Verdant Gate was calling them home. The sky turned the color of a fresh bruise as a wind, thick with the scent of rot, swept down from the northern wastes. It was not a natural storm. This was the Blight Weaver's answer to their reunion, a tidal wave of decay meant to scour the land clean of their hope. On the horizon, the storm wall advanced, a churning vortex of black dust and dying light, consuming everything in its path. And directly in its path was a desperate, fleeing caravan of merchants and families, their carts laden with the last remnants of their homes. There was no time for discussion, only instinct. The five keepers moved as one. Kalin was the first to act, roaring as he slammed his hands into the earth. A great wall of stone and packed soil erupted from the ground, a curved rampart to shield the caravan's flank. But the storm was a living thing, and it simply flowed over the top, raining down particles of pure corruption that withered the grass to dust. Bryn responded, her hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. A crystalline canopy, shimmering like 1,000 diamonds, formed over the refugees, deflecting the blighted rain. Each impact sent a spiderweb of cracks through her creation, and she strained, constantly mending the fractures with raw will. Finn stood at the rear, his focus on the very air they breathed. He wove the winds, creating a swirling buffer zone that slowed the storm's advance, buying them precious seconds. but the blight seeped into the currents themselves, threatening to poison the lungs of everyone he protected. Reese, his power still raw from his long vigil, did not build. He anchored. He placed his hands on the ground and became an unshakable foundation, his presence steadying the very ley lines beneath them, preventing the land from fracturing under the assault. And Elara moved among the people, her hands glowing with a soft, verdant light. Where a child stumbled and scraped a knee on blighted stone, her touch healed the wound instantly. Where the despair of the refugees threatened to become a poison of its own, she radiated a calm, resilient hope, a shield for their spirits. They were a symphony of defense, each playing their part in a desperate, coordinated dance. For the first time since the Severance, they were not hiding or running. They were protecting openly and completely, and the awestruck faces of the people they saved reforged their purpose in a crucible of necessity. From the heart of the storm, a figure coalesced. It was a mockery of a human form, woven from shadow and shifting decay, with eyes that held the cold emptiness between stars. The Blightweaver's avatar spoke, its voice a chorus of rustling leaves and cracking bones. "You fight for a world that birthed me," it hissed, its gaze locking with Kalin's. "Your great ritual of love did not create me, it merely opened the door. I am the famine after the feast, the frost that kills the spring bloom. I am nature's own cure for the disease of life, the balance to your reckless growth." The taunt was a blade aimed at their deepest shame. "You are a mistake, a consequence of your own fear. You shattered the one thing that kept the world's extremes in check, and in that void, I was empowered. I do not wish to destroy the Verdant Gate. That would be wasteful. I will corrupt it. I will make its boundless life my own engine of endless decay. I will become the new order." The revelation struck them with the force of a physical blow. Their enemy was not an invader from some outer darkness, but a part of the world itself, twisted and magnified by their own failure. This was not a war of annihilation, but a battle for the soul of nature. With a unified cry of defiance, the five keepers unleashed their power, not as separate forces, but as a single, focused beam of pure, ordered energy. It was not an attack of destruction, but of restoration. Their combined light struck the avatar, and for a moment, the form held, screaming its hatred. Then it unraveled, its essence scattered back into the storm, which itself began to dissipate, its concentrated malice broken. Silence fell heavy and profound. The caravan was safe. The path to the Verdant Gate now lay open before them, a road through cleansed lands, but the cost of their victory was the chilling knowledge of what awaited them. The final battle would not be to rebuild a lock, but to reclaim a key from a thief who already held it in his grasp. The path to the grove was a fortress of living brambles. A wall of thorns, each one longer than a spear and gleaming with a faint, defensive magic, barred their way. This was no mere overgrowth, it was a final, sentient trial. As Alara approached, the thorns did not retreat, but they stilled, their points turning toward her like 1,000 questioning eyes. She did not raise her hands or summon power. She simply breathed and let the pure, unbroken connection to life that had first called to the emerald seed radiate from her very core. It was a silent conversation, a reassurance that she was not a thief or a destroyer, but a healer returning home. The wall of thorns shuddered, and then, with a sound like a soft sigh, They parted, creating a narrow, winding path into the heart of the valley. The true test began the moment the others stepped inside. The thorns did not attack their bodies, but their spirits, manifesting their deepest flaws into tangible form. For Kalin, the thorns that lined his section of the path were not sharp, but heavy, coiling around his limbs like chains of solidified regret. Each one whispered of his failure, of the moment he cast the seal that broke the world. To move forward, he had to acknowledge their weight without being crushed by it. He did not try to break them, but accepted their presence, his will forging ahead, not in spite of his guilt, but carrying it with a newfound purpose. The chains of thorns turned to dust, not because he was innocent, but because he was finally willing to be accountable. Bryn's path was a beautiful, terrifying trap. The thorns around her grew into perfect, immaculate crystals, offering her a return to the flawless, unchanging stasis of her mountain prison. It promised safety, an end to struggle, and the painful chaos of a dying world. To pass, she had to reach out and shatter the perfect formations herself, embracing the fragile, ever-changing fight of life over the cold permanence of surrender. The crystalline thorns dissolved into motes of light, acknowledging her choice to live in an imperfect world. Finn found his way blocked by thorns that were soft and pliable, bending away from any force, promising no resistance, no conflict, only the endless, passive flow he had sought by his lake. To overcome them, he had to become the current, not the still pond. He had to push forward with decisive intent, to choose a direction, and carve his way through the accommodating false peace. The pliable thorns stiffened and broke before his resolved will, clearing his path. Reese faced a tunnel of thorns that grew inward, pressing him into a smaller and smaller space, mimicking the isolated vigil of his buried city. The path demanded he break the walls he had built around himself. He had to push outward, not with the solitary strength of a warden, but with the combined force of the 4 other souls walking with him. He roared, and the thorny walls splintered, not from his power alone, but from the shared strength of their reunited purpose. They emerged from the thorn forest not scarred, but strangely whole. The trial had scoured their spirits, burning away the last vestiges of their past failures and perfecting their unity. They stepped into the sacred grove as a single entity, 5 hearts beating as one. And there it was, the Verdant Gate. It was even more magnificent and more terrible than Elara's first vision. A colossal arch of living wood, so ancient it seemed to hold up the sky, woven from the trunks of countless sacred trees. But now, deep cracks ran through its heart, and from those wounds seeped a thick, black sap that smoked where it touched the pure earth. The air, which should have been thick with the scent of blooming life, was instead cloying and sickly sweet with corruption. Before the weeping gate, the very atmosphere curdled. Shadows bled from the cracks in the wood and from the corrupted sap itself, swirling together into a familiar, horrifying shape. The Blight Weaver coalesced, no longer a distant avatar, but its true, terrifying form, standing between the 5 guardians and the broken heart of the world. The final battle for the soul of nature had arrived. The Blight Weaver was not a beast to be fought with fists and fury, but a sentient storm of decay. Its true weapon was the past itself. As Kalin summoned a spire of stone to pierce its form, the entity did not dodge. Instead, it turned its hollow gaze upon him, and the memory of the Severance ritual flooded his mind, not as a distant regret, but as a raw, immediate agony. He felt the snap of the shared bond, as if it were his own bones breaking, and the spire of stone crumbled to dust before it could strike. Bryn cried out as her crystalline shields were shattered not by force, but by visions of her perfect, eternal prison, a seductive whisper promising safety if she would only surrender again. Finn stumbled as the currents he commanded turned to thick, foul sludge, the memory of his poisoned lake rising up to choke him. Reese felt the foundations of his will tremble as the solitude of his 1,000-year vigil threatened to swallow him whole. Their greatest strengths were being turned against them, their power faltering under the weight of their own remembered failures. Yet at the center of the storm, Alara stood firm. She became the anchor, the unwavering heart of their symphony. She did not counter the psychic assaults, she soothed them. When Kalin faltered, she sent a pulse of reassurance through the earth at his feet, a reminder of the solid ground beneath him. When Bryn's resolve wavered, Elara reinforced her shields with interwoven vines of living wood, a testament to life's stubborn resilience. She guided Finn's mist to cleanse the psychic poison from the air, and she bolstered Riss' foundation with the vibrant network of ley lines they had revealed together. She was the conductor, weaving their disparate magics into a single, harmonious defense. Her own power, healing the spiritual wounds the Blight Weaver inflicted as quickly as they formed. But the entity was a relentless learner. It had studied them in the swamp, in the mountains, and at the lake. It saw how Kalin's earth magic shaped the battlefield and began to liquefy the ground beneath his feet, nullifying his footing. It recognized the frequency of Bryn's crystals and vibrated the air to shatter them before they fully formed. It evaporated Finn's water into useless steam and fractured the stone Reese tried to command. Their combined efforts, once a brilliant shield, began to crack under the onslaught of an enemy that knew their every move before they made it. With a triumphant roar that shook the grove, the Blight Weaver turned its back on them, reaching its shadowy limbs toward the weeping Verdant Gate. The black sap, flowing from the archway, surged, not as a symptom of decay, but as a fuel. The entity began to drink the gate's own immense life force, twisting it into a vortex of pure blight. The very air grew heavy and thick, the vibrant green of the grove graying at the edges as the Blight Weaver started its terrible work of corrupting the heart of nature itself. They were losing. Their power was insufficient, their unity exploited. In that moment of utter desperation, as he watched the entity claim the very thing they had come to save, Kalin's mind did not turn to a bigger earthquake or a sharper stone. He saw the truth with horrifying clarity. We are still fighting it like a foreign invader, he realized, his voice a ragged gasp that carried over the din. We are trying to push it out, but it is a part of the world now, a cancer grown from our own wound. Direct force will only make it stronger. He looked at Alara, at the way her power nurtured and connected, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His eyes met those of the other keepers, a silent, desperate message passing between them. We cannot destroy it. We have to perform the mending. A sacrifice of absolute trust was their only remaining weapon. Kalin's desperate realization became a command, shouted not in anger, but in shared purpose. Do not fight it. Heal the gate. The shift was instantaneous and terrifying. Bryn's crystalline shields, Finn's protective currents, Riss' anchored foundation, all vanished. They dropped every defense and turned their backs on the entity, feasting upon the world's heart. In that moment of profound vulnerability, they offered their lives to the Blight Weaver's mercy, trusting their comrades to complete the task. Elara stood before the weeping arch, her hands raised not in defiance, but in invitation. She remembered Lyra's journal, not the fear that prompted the severance, but the profound love that had motivated it. She recalled the river's vision of the grieving keepers, their hearts breaking as they shattered their bond to save the patient from a disease. The cure was not more power, but the reversal of that ancient fracture. It was not a battle to be won, but a wound to be sutured. She began to channel her energy into the deepest crack, a pure, green light of acceptance and growth. She was not forcing the gate to heal. She was asking it to remember what it was. Kalin was the next to join her, his earth magic a grounding, stabilizing force that filled the fractures with the memory of unshakable mountains. Then Bryn, her crystalline power, bringing structure and clarity to the chaotic wounds. Finn's energy flowed like a cleansing river, washing the black sap from the living wood. Finally, Reese added his foundation, the enduring strength of the deepest stone, sealing the mending for all time. Their 5 streams of power wove together into a single, brilliant tapestry of light, a symphony of restoration that poured into the Verdant Gate. The Blight Weaver, sensing the shift from conflict to unity, turned from its feast with a shriek of pure dissonance. It lunged, its shadowy claws raking toward their undefended backs. But the harmonizing energy radiating from the mending gate was a wall it could not cross. This creature, born from the imbalance of the Severance, was a thing of pure conflict. It could not exist within a field of perfect, selfless unity. Its form began to fray at the edges, its malevolent will dissolving not in an explosion, but in a quiet unmaking. The shadows bled away into harmless, neutral energy, the chaotic hunger returning to the silent potential from which it had sprung. It did not die, it simply ceased to be, because the conditions that gave it power no longer existed. And then, with a final, thunderous pulse of light, the last crack in the Verdant Gate sealed. For a heartbeat, there was a silence more profound than any sound. Then the world exhaled. A wave of pure, vibrant life exploded from the gate, a visible shockwave of color and sound that washed over the grove and rippled out across the entire world. It was not a slow healing, but an instantaneous rebirth. The gray receded from the land, replaced by an explosion of green, so vivid it hurt the eyes. Flowers bloomed in a heartbeat, trees stretched their branches toward a suddenly clear sky, and the very air hummed with a vitality that had been missing for generations. The 5 keepers stood, bathed in the light of the world they had just restored, their long, impossible journey finally complete. The wave of pure life did not simply wash over the world, it rewrote it. In the blighted swamp, stagnant water flashed into crystalline clarity, and gnarled trees straightened, their branches exploding with luminous blossoms. The Serpent's spine mountains shook off their gray pallor, the crystalline Flora within pulsing with a joyful, synchronized rhythm. Even the vast scorched expanse transformed in a breathtaking instant, the barren sands giving way to a carpet of resilient, flowering cacti and hardy grasses, a testament to life's stubborn will. This was not a slow recovery, but a global sigh of relief, a visible and immediate reward for their unimaginable sacrifice. Before the now thrumming arch of the Verdant Gate, the 5 keepers stood as a single entity. They could feel the world's restored order humming through the soles of their feet, a deep, resonant frequency of health that vibrated in their very bones. Their individual connections to the elements were no longer solitary threads, but parts of a magnificent, interwoven tapestry. They could feel each other's presence as clearly as their own heartbeat, a bond forged in failure and tempered in redemption, now permanent and unbreakable. The weight that settled upon their shoulders was not the burden of guilt Kalin had carried, or the loneliness that had defined Reese. This was the profound responsibility of stewardship, a silent vow to nurture the balance they had just restored. They had not merely defeated an enemy, they had mended a foundational crack in reality itself. Their long journey had stripped away their isolation and reforged them from a collection of lost and broken individuals into a true unit, the restored and eternal guardians of the Verdant Gate. A profound silence settled over the grove, thick with the scent of damp earth and new blossoms. The 5 keepers stood together, not as victors celebrating a battle won, but as gardeners surveying a field they had just saved from a terrible blight. The memory of their near-fatal division hung in the air between them, a ghost that would forever shape their path forward. Kalin was the first to give voice to the unspoken truth. Our isolation was our greatest weakness, he said, his gaze sweeping over the others. We built our own prisons of solitude and called them duty. To hide from the world is to abandon it. From this shared realization, a new covenant was forged, not carved in stone, but woven into the very fabric of their renewed bond. They vowed to never again be scattered sentinels. They would remain connected, their minds and spirits linked across any distance, a living network of protection. They would seek out and mentor those rare individuals who, like Alara, showed a deep, innate connection to the natural world, ensuring that the knowledge of the Guardians would never again be lost to time. Most importantly, they would be active stewards, walking among the people, healing the small fractures before they could become catastrophic rifts. All eyes turned to Elara. It was her unwavering empathy, her ability to feel the world's pain and hope as her own, that had drawn them back together. Kalin placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of deep respect. You were the heart that started this heart beating again, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Your way must guide our way. In this new order, compassion would be their compass, and connection their greatest strength. Their parting was not an end, but a new beginning. Bryn chose to return to the Serpent's spine, not to sleep in crystal, but to teach the mountain's resilient Flora to sing. Finn walked back toward his lake, ready to guide its currents to cleanse other poisoned waters. Reese, his foundation now unshakable, journeyed to the reborn desert to help its new life take root. Kalin and Elara remained for a time at the Verdant Gate, the master of will and the heart of life, preparing to walk their own paths. There were no final goodbyes, only a silent, certain knowledge that they were never truly apart. A thought, a need, a call for aid could now travel between them in an instant, a whisper on the wind or a tremor in the stone. The world was safe, lush and vibrant once more, but the duty of protection had simply changed its form. It was no longer a desperate fight against an encroaching shadow, but the eternal, gentle work of nurturing a garden, forever tended by hands that would never again work alone. The ancient forest breathed around her, a symphony of rustling leaves and humming insects, where once there had been only a desperate, dying whisper. Alara stood in the very clearing where her journey had begun, but the world was transformed. Where her fingers had brushed the moss to find a single, pulsating emerald seed, a magnificent tree now reached for the sky, its bark shimmering with a soft, internal light, and its leaves chiming gently in the breeze. It was a living monument to the hope she had carried when all seemed lost. She ran her hand over the smooth, warm bark, feeling not just the life of this one tree, but the vibrant, interconnected pulse of the entire world. The solitary botanist who could only feel the forest's pain was gone. In her place stood a woman woven into the very fabric of nature's order, a cornerstone in a structure more ancient and complex than she had ever dreamed. Her own healing, from fear to courage, from isolation to connection, was reflected perfectly in the land's rebirth. Across the continents, her fellow keepers tended their domains. She could feel Kalin's steadying presence in the deep earth, guiding new roots through once barren soil. A flicker of crystalline clarity told her Bryn was teaching the mountain gems to harmonize their light. The gentle flow of a cleansed river carried Finn's contentment, and the unshakable patience of a newly anchored desert was Reese's silent greeting. They were not physically with her, but their spirits were threads in a single, luminous tapestry. The gentle hum of their shared consciousness was a constant, comforting presence in the back of her mind, a connection that could never be severed again. They were the guardians of the Verdant Gate, lost no more, their purpose reforged in the crucible of shared sacrifice. The great gate itself stood strong, a silent, thrumming heart at the center of the world, its power no longer a beacon for decay, but a wellspring of balanced life. A profound peace settled over the grove, but it was not the silence of an ended story. It was the quiet, active peace of a garden after the rain, full of potential and the promise of continued growth. The world was holding its breath, not in fear, but in a state of perfect, vigilant balance. The keepers had learned that protection was not a fortress to be built, but a relationship to be nurtured, a song to be sung in harmony with the wind, the stone, and the living heart of everything. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the teeming life she had helped restore, Alara knew their watch had only just begun.